here is the situation as it stands. You live in the pre-disclosure world. As you can see, it's a very dark, bleak place with giant truth vacuums. All right, this is not where you want to be. You want to be in the post-disclosure world. That's a galaxy. See the nice galaxy? It's very bright, very nice. That's where we have to get to. But we can't get to there because there is an impenetrable barrier. At least it was impenetrable. During the Cold War from 47 to 91, we could not get through that barrier. It wasn't going to happen. But in the last 22 years since the end of the Cold War, what has happened is that barrier has slowly faded away and shrunk to this, a thin red line. That's what stands between us and the pre-disclosure and the post-disclosure world. Now, what is that barrier? It is the truth embargo. I'm going to tell you one more time, it's that policy initiated by the U.S. government with the cooperation of its World War II allies to withhold from their citizens the truth of the extraterrestrial non-human beings engaging the human race. The major nations and our allies knew about the ET presences no later than 47 and possibly 10 years sooner, right? But it really became a factor in 47. That was a long time ago. And so this has been 68 years now, this truth embargo has been in place. And ending the truth embargo will be the act of disclosure. It is an event. It is capital D. It is the formal acknowledgement by the world governments of this non-human extraterrestrial intelligence engaging us. It's a big deal. It really matters, right? What your government formally announces. Like it really matters when your government formally declares war, right? That does affect you quite a bit. There are a lot of other things like that. Governments, we don't like them, we don't like the politics, but believe me, if we ignore it, we do so at our peril. There is another phrase which you can put into Google with quotes. It's not a common phrase, you don't hear it much. It's called the Rockefeller Initiative. And when you put it in, you get a meager 6,140 pages. Not much, not much. Not really as powerful as Monica Lewinsky. But the issue is about 1 million times more important than the president's dalliance. 1 million times, and I think I'm understating it. So it's underrepresented on Google, okay? The Rockefeller Initiative, very quickly, 1993 to 1996. So what is it? Lawrence Rockefeller, the good billionaire Rockefeller, friend of the Clintons, donor to the Democratic Party. When the Cold War ended in 91, he realized that the opportunity for disclosure was finally at hand. Remember what I said earlier? And so he made the decision, whoever won the election, he would approach them about pretty much resolving this issue. The approach was to release all of the files in the government's hands, everything they've got. Well, you know, that would be the ball game, right? And also grant amnesty to witnesses. But the man that won the election was Bill Clinton, so it was closer to home for him. And on March the 29th, Rockefeller approached the White House with a letter from his attorney, Henry Diamond, and the Rockefeller Initiative began, March the 29th, 1993. An effort basically to have Bill Clinton be the disclosure president and obtain one of the greatest political legacies in all of history. The principles, the government principles involved in this initiative, which went on for 3.5 years, right, were the Clintons, the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Dr. John Gibbons, the advisor to Clinton at the time, John Podesta, eventually his chief of staff, the Associate Attorney General Webster Hubbell, who he appointed to justice, and the CIA Science and Technology Officer, Dr. Ronald Pandolfi, who was at the CIA at that time. The private sector principals included Lawrence Rockefeller, his attorney Henry Diamond, former Navy Intelligence Officer Captain C.B. Scott Jones, his right-hand man Richard Farley, who's a journalist now, and other secondary principals who are mentioned included Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird, Secretary of Air Force Sheila Wignall, Senator Patty Murray, and Senator Claiborne Pell. Pell and Laird, I believe, are deceased. Now, there were some people that I call the watchers. These were individuals in administration or nearby that we are certain, almost certain, knew about the Rockefeller Initiative. One of them was his chief of staff, Leon Panetta. If you're the chief of staff to the president, you know everything that's going in the White House, okay, right? And so he would have known about the Rockefeller Initiative. And then a close friend of the Clintons, a congressman and eventually Clinton Secretary of Energy, Bill Richardson, from New Mexico, we're certain he knew about it. And then, of course, his brother-in-arms, Vice President Al Gore. They were touted as like the most compatible pair in the White House in a long time as VP president. He would have known. And then not certain, but I believe that this gentleman, the late Congressman Stephen Schiff, knew about it. What's going on here? The Clintons, while he was president of the United States, engaged this issue for 3.5 years in multiple ways. His wife was fully involved, and this went on for 3.5 years. And only one article was ever written about it. It was in the New York Daily News by Deborah Orrin. Nothing else followed. The mainstream media would not touch it. Now, if Hillary wore an off-color pantsuit, that was going to generate front-page articles in the New York Times. But engaging the extraterrestrial issue, well, where's the story there? That's truth embargo. That's all you need to know. Truth embargo. We have to end that embargo to resolve the issue. Okay. We also got some more stuff. Grant Cameron didn't stop with the FOIA. He then filed requests to the Presidential Library. You see, the documents in the presidential section cannot be FOIA. You have to get those to the Presidential Library and the President's Documents Act. And he did. He was one of the first people to submit. And he got a number of documents back, which were interesting, but never found. But what he did get back was these photos. Now, let me repeat something that's critical. In the 22 years since the Rockefeller Initiative began, none of the people that I just talked to you about, you know, Clinton, and Richardson, Pandolfi, and Gibbons, and Podesta, and Al Gore, have ever uttered a single word publicly about this initiative, and have never been asked a single question until about a month ago, 2 months ago, about this issue, embargo, right? Now, we learned, though, that Hillary Clinton, in a private discussion, when she was approached about this privately, said, oh, no, we never talked about the ET thing when I was up at the ranch, because they were at the ranch in 1995, Rockefeller's ranch in Wyoming. But we didn't talk about that. Okay. We got these photos. Here's one of Bill at the ranch in 95, and of course this is Hillary with Rockefeller in 95. Now, interesting, she's walking across the bridge and she has a book in her hand, in her arm. Well, a French researcher decided, I'm going to find that book. And so he started looking at lots of books. It took him a couple of years, and he identified that book that she was carrying that day. Was it a cookbook? Was it like the history of, Europe in the 17th century? There are several million possibilities that she could have in her arm there. But what she had was this, and that book is this, right? And that book is Are We Alone? Philosophical Implications of the Discovery of Extraterrestrial Life. Let's be clear. Whatever you think of the Clintons' policies as president, I happen to think that a lot of them are quite good for Bill. I'm more left of center, though I'm a registered independent. The Clintons are some of the most accomplished liars that have ever gotten into the White House, okay? Now, you can lie for good purpose. You know, like a benevolent dictator. And you can lie for evil purpose. But lying is still lying. And it eventually causes problems, as we have seen. All right? So yes, she talked about it at the ranch in 1995. Which brings us back to this man, who is, in fact, I believe, the central figure in all of this. And that is John Podesta. Long-time confidant of the Clintons, many positions with them. He is the brightest man in the room. He is behind the scenes. He doesn't politic. He's launched a think tank, and he's an important historical figure. And he is definitely close to the Clintons. All right? Okay. So from 93 to 2001, political dynamics have profoundly changed. I know you weren't paying attention. It's okay. I will do that for you. All right? And then something happened. 16 months after Clinton leaves the White House, his former advisor and chief of staff, John Podesta, turns up at the National Press Club on October the 22nd and makes the following statement.
The right to speak and the right to print without the right to know are pretty empty. So I believe that the notion of open government, freedom of information, the fundamental tenets of the Freedom of Information Act are really part and parcel of our First Amendment rights. I think it's time to open the books on questions that have remained in the dark, on the question of government investigations of UFOs. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law. So there are these cases in which documents haven't been made available to the American public. The American public, as Bonnie noted, is quite skeptical about the fact that the government won't make them available for public inspection. These are records that are more than 25 years old. They ought to be declassified, they ought to be released, and we ought to be able to see for ourselves what's included in those documents.
Now let me be clear. For someone who's not familiar with Washington politics, this may not have really impacted on them very much. But if you are familiar with Washington politics, let me tell you, a former advisor to the president and the chief of staff to a president who comes out 16 months after that president leaves office having lost to the opposition party, having the election stolen out from under their nose, does not go into the National Press Club and call for all the UFO files to be released. For the hell of it. He's doing it because there is something going down. There is something so big, he could take that risk. Remember, he's completely bound to the Clintons. If he gets UFO eyes tinfoil hatted on this, it's going to spill over to them. But of course, he's not doing that unless they've not only authorized it, but maybe even engendered it. That was October 22nd. He then came back on October 23rd of 2003 for another press conference regarding the Coalition of Information, Freedom of Information, which I think no longer exists now. It was set up to look into the issue in a mainstream way, meaning it wouldn't hire crazy people like us. And calls for the release again. Again. And in the year between those two calls for the release of the files, he raised $25 million and founded the most recent and most powerful progressive think tank in the country, the Center for American Progress. He had no trouble raising 25 million bucks, right? First 10 years I was in this field, I couldn't raise 20 bucks. UFOs, are you crazy? You know, I'd rather gamble my money away at a casino. He raised 25 million. Now again, to someone outside of the Beltway, it's like, yeah. But if you're inside the Beltway, you're going, what the hell is going on here? Well, I kind of know what's going on. The Democrats could have been the disclosure president in 93 and 96. That was taken away from them by an avalanche of attacks and everything else that you can imagine. And a block, of course, by the Pentagon, which wouldn't have given Bill Clinton a bucket of water if he was on fire. And they were going to win the White House back in that election in 2000, and Gore would be the disclosure president. And they'd get grandfathered in. But the election, they didn't win it. But they could win the next one, 2004. And so Podesta starts to lay some groundwork. Essentially what he's doing is he's, without mentioning it, connecting back to the Rockefeller Initiative, which at some point when it serves their purpose, they're going to suddenly pull out and say, hey, look what we did, we tried. You know, we really got the ball rolling. You know, John Kerry will be the disclosure president, but hey, we played a big part in that. And by the way, John Kerry's a Democrat, so everybody wins. Then comes the citizen hearing. We were lucky. We finally found a funder that would allow me to do the citizen hearing, which I had originally proposed in 2001. And we got $1 million. And so we put on citizen hearing in Washington, D.C. With the idea of eventually getting congressional hearings. The citizen hearing was a mock congressional hearing, right? So we held the hearing. We filmed all 30 hours, all right? It was the largest concentration of researchers and witnesses ever assembled in one place at one time. It was a milestone event. And that then set the stage for the congressional hearing initiative, which is currently underway, all right? The congressional hearing initiative was launched on November the 5th, Guy Fawkes Day, the day after the election, when we shipped the full 30-hour video record of the entire citizen hearing on disclosure to every single member of Congress, House and Senate. I arrived in town on November the 20th, all right? And this is the cover of the congressional set of the citizen hearing on disclosure that they received. It also had a cover letter associated with it, signed by all the witnesses. We also launched a social media campaign based at factsonwashington.org and the web page, Facebook page, the Disclosure Lobby, which has 11,000 members. And over the next 2.5 months, generated 1.3 million tweets and Facebook messages spread across the entire Congress, letting them know we were coming and what to do. And read the look at the DVD and talk to me and blah, blah, blah. 1.5 million, all right? And then things started to happen.
President Bill Clinton is here with us, so if I was president, and I won't be, let's be honest, the first thing I would do after putting my hand on that Bible and taking that oath to serve the country is, I wouldn't even probably finish the oath. I would run to the White House. I demand to see all the classified files on the UFOs. Because I want to know. I'd want to know what has been going on. Did you do that?
Sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah, we had, I think it was at the beginning of my second term, we had the anniversary of Roswell.
You waited that long?
I did.
Wow.
Well, I did. And then there's also Area 51. You remember there was a great sci-fi movie where there was an alien kept deep under the ground in Area 51? So first I had people go look at the records on Area 51 to make sure there was no alien down there. And people thought that because everybody who works there has to stop about an hour away and put on special clothing and then drive in and out. And that's because a lot of our stealth technology is made there. We know that now, but there are no aliens there. So then when the Roswell thing came up, I knew we'd get, gazillions of letters. So I had all the Roswell papers reviewed, everything.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would?
The audience. Isn't that
I think, look, what do we know? We know now we live in an ever-expanding universe. We know that there are billions of stars and planets literally out there, and the universe is getting bigger. We know from our fancy telescopes that just in the last 2 years, more than 20 planets have been identified outside our solar system that seem to be far enough away from their suns and dense enough that they might be able to support some form of life. So it makes it increasingly less likely that we're alone.
Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
I'm trying to tell you I don't know. But if we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised. I just hope that it's not like Independence Day.
Yeah, right.
That it's a conflict.
Well, now we have friendly
Maybe the only way to unite this incredibly divided world of ours. They're out there. We better think of how all the differences among people on Earth would seem small if we felt threatened by a space invader. That's the whole theory of independence.
You're right.
Everybody gets together and makes nice, and
You and Bill O'Reilly would be hiding in a bunker together.
Every mean thing you ever said about me, I don't care. Look at that.
What is going on here? Bill Clinton, knowing that the citizen hearing on disclosure video record was supposed to have been sent to Congress, was going to be sent to Congress in 6 days, and that on the first day of that testimony, there's 3 hours of testimony on the Rockefeller Initiative, naming names, the Clintons, the Podesta, all of them. And it's going to the Congress. Goes on the show to inoculate himself. To give, in other words, we got to respond, and this is an indication that they are being formally challenged here. So he goes on to inoculate himself, give himself a little cover. Now, most of what he said there's not true. He's good. He's really, really good. And he never refers to the Rockefeller Initiative, and he misdirects and whatever. But that's inoculation, folks. It's called a limited hangout. Then something else happens. All right? I send the first request to meet with staffers on Capitol Hill on January the 3rd, when the new term began for the House and Senate. And worked those for the month, not much was happening. And then in February the 1st or 2nd, I upped the ante and I sent a fax request to 80 or 90 members of 5 key committees. I sent a fax on February the 2nd or 3rd, and then I sent a second fax requesting a meeting on February the 9th. And that fax was a full page long, and there was a paragraph in there all about the Rockefeller Initiative. 4 days later, John Podesta, upon leaving his job for 1 year as advisor to President Obama, he's back, and already announced to become key advisor to Clinton. He's now her campaign chair. On the day he leaves, he posts this tweet. Finally, my biggest failure of 2014, once again, not securing the hashtag disclosure of the UFO files, and he copies Maureen Dowd of the New York Times. Hashtag disclosure was the hashtag we used in the social media campaign that generated the 1.4 million messages. Now, let me be clear here. What now? No, I'm going to have to cut off about 20 minutes to the end. I know. Yeah, I do have a workshop, and I can retrace this, but it's not intentional. Look, if you were former chief of staff to a president, and now you're an advisor to a new president, and you've already been announced to be the key advisor to the heir apparent to the White House, and you leave the job at the White House, you do not put a tweet out about UFOs that is relevant to the issue. You don't do it unless you have a very good reason. He knew that 90 key members of the House and Senate had just gotten the facts again on the Rockefeller initiative. He's inoculating himself and the Clintons by indirectly referring back to the Rockefeller initiative. They are maneuvering, they're dancing on their side, we're dancing on our side. This tweet thus generates a huge article in Heard on the Hill, Capital, a roll call newspaper, in which they mention everything. It's all in there, including the first reference to the Rockefeller Initiative in the mainstream press in 22 years. That then triggers the Kimmel show of March the 13th, right? This is probably the last thing I'm going to be able to show you. And this was amazing. And here's what happened March the 13th.
So this is something I feel like, if I was the president, and it's unlikely that that is ever going to happen.
You never know.
If I was the president...
It was unlikely that I was going to be president.
The moment I was inaugurated, my hand would just, it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and UFOs, and I go through everything to find out what happened. Right?
Did you happen to notice that the question that he asked was virtually identical? Yeah. Because both questions were submitted in advance. He didn't. This is not off the cuff. No president goes on a late night show not knowing exactly what's going to happen. Otherwise, Kimmel might just say, "Bill, Monica's here tonight. Bring her on now. Let's talk old times." So he asked him the same question, and then he gives him this fairly, well, again, he's very good. He's very good.
That's why you will not be president. That's the first thing that you would do. The aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really? Because President Clinton said he did go right in, and he did check, and there was nothing.
Well, you know, that's what we're instructed to say.
Okay, that then generated another major article in Mother Jones magazine. Here is what you would learn if I finish this. I'll go back in the workshop, no problem. There's more here, but what I'm trying to tell you is this. We are this close to forcing Hillary Clinton, who's facing 18 Republican candidates this time, not one, John McCain, and any one of them could tinfoil hat her without even second choice. We're this close to forcing her to have to address the Rockefeller Initiative. And the moment she starts asking questions, it will immediately metastasize to Clinton, her husband, and to Podesta. If that happens, this issue explodes, and you get the end of this embargo within 60 days. That's it. Thank you.